Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we are looking at the murders of Karlov Manor and the deck dump that I'm about to show you guys. So plenty of new cards and let's get straight into it. So as I said, this is going to be a zoo. I didn't actually say that. So if you saw that, if you didn't see that in the title, this is going to be a zoo deck dump. Consider yourself clickbaited. But yeah, anyway. So let's look at Breakout. Breakout is the first card that I want to look at. If you are not familiar with the card, it's one red and one green. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. Put a creature from them into your hand. But if it's 2 or less mana, it actually goes straight into play. So to me, this is a very, very powerful tool because you can hit so many different creatures in Zoo, being a deck full of creatures. But if it's a 2-drop, it gets haste. So Territorial Karvus, Nishoba Brawlers, Tarmogoyfs, I guess Orcish Bowmaster, but more of the big beefy creatures. Giving them haste is very, very powerful. So I've gone through way more 2-drops than I care to admit. And I'm going to show you guys the best ways to break out. And just for some math for you guys, if you play about 20 2-drops or 20 creatures that you're happy to hit from Breakout, you have about a 6 to 7% chance of hitting it on turn 2. But if you play about 23 creatures, you're only about 3 to 4%. Do the math on your own if you wish to, but you can see it there. You can try and work out what I've done there, or look up. I'm sure there's plenty of people who are showing you the calculations online, but I just did the math. So yeah, Breakout. The first deck that we're going to be looking at is the Traditional Zoo, which is basically what everyone has come to know as like Traditional Zoo in Modern at the moment. And we've just tried to add for Breakout. So with this deck, if you add Breakout, you obviously have to cut some instants and sorceries because there's just only so many that you can play. You need to keep your creature count high for Breakout, and you're still an aggro deck, so or at least an aggressive mid-range deck at worst. So you need to keep your creature count high. So in this case, we've cut Bolt, but I'm not sure what the correct cut is. Bolt, Tribal Flame, Stubborn Denial, Leyline Binding, maybe some combination of all of them. But yeah, that is the main list. And you will also see, so first of all, you have to cut Sign of Draco in your creature count because it is a 2-drop, but it's not really a 2-drop when Breakout was looking. So the options that we've gone for here is Nishoba Brawler. We've gone up to the full 4. And as well as that, we've gone with Tarmogoyf, and as well as that, we've gone with Inti as well. These are basically just some of the best 2-drops that you can have access to. Inti is a great card advantage machine, especially when you combo him with Karvu. So the next list is more of a black shell, and I actually think this is probably one of the ones I think is more powerful, potentially. I think this one offers some of the more explosive games, and I think the threats in here are a lot more powerful, I think, as well. So this one opts to use the very commonly known card from the original Suicide deck that used to get played in Death Shadow. Let's go back. And it pairs it with Scourge of the Skyclaves, which is essentially just like another version of Death Shadow. The reason I really like the black version is because these are 2 great creatures that are 1 and 2 mana, so you're really happy to hit them from Breakthrough. Breakout. I keep calling it Breakthrough. I'm going to keep calling it the wrong name. Yeah, but it just means you can play these over things like Nishoba Brawler and Tarmogoyf, because on turn 2, Tarmogoyf's not great, and Scourge can actually be pretty good, and more importantly, it scales out of control much quicker. And obviously with Death Shadow, it's not very easy to get online on turn 2, so the reason that we are playing a combination of Street Wraith and Thoughtseize is just to try and make sure that you can get your Death Shadow in play if you do hit it off a Breakout. So you can Fetch Shock into Fetch Shock. That's 6 damage straight away. So that puts you down to 14, and then you just need to do like a Street Wraith or a Thoughtseize or something, and you can keep your Death Shadow on turn 2. One thing that I think could be really fun in this list, and I've put it in, is Dreadhorde Arcanist. So you might be thinking, why is Dreadhorde in this deck? And I thought it would be really sweet to try, because if you pair Dreadhorde Arcanist with a Mutagenic Growth, you can then hit Breakout. So in theory, you can go turn 2, Breakout, hit Dreadhorde. Dreadhorde comes in, use Mutagenic Growth on it, attack with your Dreadhorde. The trigger on its attack means that you then cast another Breakout. So you can technically cast 2 Breakouts on turn 2, which I think could be really, really funny. Maybe that's Magical Christmas Land, but I think it's really, really sweet. But like, even if you don't do the mutagenic growth combo, you can still use your Dreadhorde Arcanist to cast things like Thoughtseize and Bolt. And you know, it's very reasonable that your curve is turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Breakout, hit Arcanist, swing, and then you Thoughtseize your opponent again. And you've taken 2 cards and you still got a Dreadhorde in play. So that's a very reasonable line of play. So yeah, that is this list. There is another way that you can go with it as well, which is with Inti instead of Dreadhorde. I think that's probably a more realistic approach. Not as fun, I don't think, but it seems a lot more solid. Because you're discarding with your Inti alone, your Territorial Kavu, and also a Street Wraith. So that's a lot of discard that you're just naturally doing. So obviously Inti can become very big or make other creatures very big. But it also just gives you like a nice little card advantage engine, which I don't think people would expect to see from such like an aggressive deck. So yeah, you can play Inti, you could play Dreadhorde, whatever your heart desires. But I don't know if I said it in the intro, but all of these deck techs that I go over, I will be making a video on so you guys can see them all being played. So maybe I should have said that at the beginning. Yeah, probably. But yeah, if you want to see any of these decks, make sure to subscribe because we'll play all of them. The next one is, I think, probably the funnest version of the deck. This one is a twist on the old Burning Tree, Hidden Herbalist, Reckless Bushwhacker combo deck. So if you're not familiar with this deck, there are a bunch of 2-drops in Hidden Herbalist and in Burning Tree Emissary. So that's 8 copies of a card that is a 2-mana creature that gives you that 2 mana back. So you can go turn 2, Hidden Herbalist, Burning Tree Emissary in whatever combination you want. As long as you finish on a Burning Tree Emissary, you can then cast a Reckless Bushwhacker for its Surge cost, which then gives all of those 2-drops that you've played haste and +1/+0. So quite a common play in the old version of the deck was turn 1 Goblin Guide or turn 1 Wild Nagatal, turn 2 Burning Tree, maybe another Burning Tree, Reckless Bushwhacker, and then you just swing for a hell of a lot of damage. Well, if you've got 4 Breakout on your deck, you can just cast more Burning Trees in theory because you can just keep finding more. So you could just go like turn 2 Burning Tree, hit Breakout, maybe find another Burning Tree, and then play something else. And my favorite card that we can play is Mere Superion. So if you haven't seen this card, there's a reason for it. It's pretty bad, but it's pretty good with Breakout. So it's a 2-mana 5/6, which is obviously ridiculous. That's a huge creature for 2 mana. But it has a little bit of a drawback. You can't spend mana that's not made from anything else. Wait, that's a terrible way of putting it. You can only spend mana produced by creatures to cast it. That's why they wrote that on the card. That's a much better way to explain it. So there's no mana dorks in this deck. So how do we cast Mere Superion? Well, first of all, you can break out into it because you're not casting it. And second of all, you actually have a bunch of mana dorks in it, but not in a typical sense. So 4 Hidden Herbalist, 4 Burning Tree Emissary. You can literally just go turn 2, Burning Tree, Hidden Herbalist, Mere Superion, and you now have 9 power in play. I literally just played this deck. I proxied it up the breakouts, and I was just playing it against one of my friends downstairs, and it was actually a lot of fun. So yeah, I think this deck is really, really sweet, and you can do some crazy things. You also get to play a Tarkus command, so if you're going to flood the board with 0 mana 2/2s, you can just turn them into 3/3s, get in a bunch of damage. If your opponent has like a Shouldered or an Atraxa, you can stop them from gaining life. Yeah, deck is really, really sweet. Obviously, you can swap out a Tarkus command if you'd like. You can play Tribal Flames. You could play, what else is there? Lightning Bolt. There are tons of things you can play. Boris Charm if you really wanted to. There's loads of options, but I think a Tarkus command is really, really sweet. And then I called this... this is a slight variation on the deck that I just showed you. This one is, I called it Crackpipe Zoo, because basically it's the same as what I just showed you, except that it plays 4 Chancellor of the Tangle, which says you removal this card from your opening hand. If you do, you get an additional green in your first main phase. So you go up to 2 mana on turn 1. And you also get to play 4 Gemstone Cavern as well. And now you basically just want to get as many times as you can 2 mana on turn 1, and then you just try and do the same combo, but you do it on turn 1. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. I don't think this would be very good. I think this will be trash, but I will be upholding my agreement where I will be playing all of these decks, and I think it would be pretty sweet to play a Mere Superior on turn 1, or just cast like a Burning Tree, Bushwhacker. Again, on turn 1, I think would just be really sweet. So we're going to try and do it. I think it could be really, really fun. It will probably give a 1-4 result, but that one game that you win will just be worth it because it'll be really fun. What are up to next? So the next card is Leyline of the Guildpact. I think everyone's been looking at this card, and loads of people were saying, oh my god, it pairs with Sign of Draco and with Leyline Binding. This card is crazy. I hate to be the person to break it to you, but that is not why this card is good. This card is good because it has 4 green mana pips and it doesn't cost any mana. I do not think this will be good in a Sign of Draco deck. Probably. It's not doing what I think people want it to do. I think it's more of a use it with a Nykthos and stuff. But I think maybe there was a deck I previously played with Painter's Servant and Sign of Draco. Maybe that could work, because if you have a Leyline in play and a Sign of Draco, your Draco becomes a 2-mana flying, lifelink, first strike, trample, vigilance, hexproof, 4/4. That's a lot of stats and a lot of keywords for 2 mana. But yeah, I don't think there's really too much to do with this. I'm sure I will be playing some janky Zoo deck with it at some point. But yeah, maybe we'll give that a try. And then the next card that I want to talk about is Pick Your Poison. Nothing crazy exciting, but a very, very good utility card. 1 green mana, and then you choose 1. Each opponent sacrifices an artifact, an enchantment, or a creature with flying. Now, this card is... I'm pretty sure they've printed very similar cards to this in the past, but this is kind of like the best version that they've come up with so far. The reason I like this card so much is because it hits... Well, for starters, it really hits Murktide. It hits Murktide region itself and Blood Moon, which are 2 very problematic permanents for Zoo. And it doesn't... It's very strange that it hits a very large flyer and a very problematic permanent at the same time. Sorry, enchantment. So it's very, very versatile. I don't really like to bring in things like Natural State or Force of Negation against blue-red, but you kind of have to because of Blood Moon. But this way, it doesn't matter if they play the Murktide or they play the Blood Moon, you can use it on either, and it just gives you a lot of versatility. It is also really good against things like the Ring, Urza's Saga. Yeah, there's loads and loads of hits for Pick Your Poison. I think this is not only going to be a Zoo staple, I think this is just going to be a modern staple moving forward. That's a lot of versatility for 1 green mana. So I think the most obvious replacement is Natural State. A lot of people already play Natural State. But I think that Pick Your Poison is probably going to basically just replace it. It's definitely not strictly better by any means. There are specific matchups where it's actually significantly worse. First of all, it's Sorcery versus Instant, which is obviously a huge drawback. And the other one is your opponent gets to pick. So it's not like you make them pick their ring, it's they choose. So against things like Hardened Scales, they're never going to sack their Shadow Spear if they don't have to. They'll sack some crappy artifact. Or if they've got a huge dude with a bunch of counters on, they're just going to sack something else. And again, the same with Amulet. If you try and Natural State your opponent in their opponent's turn, that's great. Well, the other one's Sorcery Speed. So if they just slow roll their amulets, that could be very problematic as well. So overall, I think this Pick Your Poison is going to be really, really good, but it is not strictly better by any means, so keep that in mind. Yeah, how long has this gone on for? About 15 minutes, which I think is plenty of time. I'm sure a lot of people had lots of questions about different Zoo decks, and I hope that I've answered them and shown you guys some awesome deck lists that we can try out. As I said, we will be playing all of those lists and probably more. So if you want to see any of those lists, make sure to subscribe. We will be going through them. And if you have any suggestions on cards, decks, anything, let me know. Especially if it's Zoo related, I generally play pretty much every list that comes out just to give it a go. And I think if you enjoyed the content, make sure to subscribe. And yeah, peace.